Hello, Fleur, and thank you so much for joining us in this special interview series on women in politics. I'm so happy that we have you today.
Hi, it's really wonderful to be here again. Natalie, we spoke a few months ago in the middle of the COVID, and now, thank God, we're looking at getting out of it. So it's wonderful to be back.
Exactly. We spoke at the Global Online Leadership Summit when we spoke about women leadership in general, but now we're going to talk about leadership in politics, especially for women. So you're one of the best person to speak to about leadership and women and politics. So I'm going to start by reading your bio. So if there are still some people who don't know about you, they'll know about what you did.
There's loads.
I know it's always interesting to remind everyone what you've done, and then we'll speak about leadership, women leadership, and in politics. So Fleur grew up in Gibraltar and studied law at King's College, London University. She qualified as a barrister in Middle Temple in 1997 and practiced in London before immigrated to Israel in 2001. In Israel, she worked at JDC in resource development for Europe and later became the executive director of Tikva, a nonprofit organization saving abandoned and abused Jewish children from the former Soviet Union. In 2011, she set up her own communication consulting business, Message Experts, which offers consulting work to large corporations as well as nonprofit organizations on effective communication strategies. And in May 2016, Fleur became a city councilor in Jerusalem. And in February 2017, she became the leader of the opposition. In November 2018, she was re-elected to the Jerusalem Municipal Council and was appointed deputy mayor for foreign relations, economic development, and tourism. Fleur is currently the only British politician in Israel and is involved in the advancement of women's rights and marginalized populations groups in the city, economic development, and the fight for a pluralistic Jerusalem. Fleur is also the co-founder of the UAE Israel Business Council, as well as the Gulf Israel Women's Forum. Wow. Still, every time I read your bio, I'm very, very impressed. So we just had the Women's Day a few days ago. We have the elections coming up on March 23rd. We are here in a special interview series on women in politics. And the first question I want to ask you, Fleur, is how would you qualify the difference between a masculine and a feminine leadership, especially in politics?
Okay, so I want to start off by saying that, everybody is who they are and everybody's an individual. So when I generalize, I'm generalizing, okay? So there's women who go, but there are certain traits and there are statistics that tell us certain things. And statistics tell us something very simple, and that is women have higher emotional intelligence than men. And to manage, big systems and the best CEOs in the world, what actually distinguishes them is not their highest IQ, is the highest EQ, which is something that women have already naturally inborn, built in. So I think that today leadership has to be coming from both men and women, because women have and men have complementary skill sets. And the skill sets that the women have are skill sets that are extremely relevant to today. Skill sets of mediation, listening. Listening is one of the most important things in leadership. People don't understand. They think it's talking, but it's actually listening. We have bridge building abilities, incredible multitasking bridge building abilities. We know how to detonate, a bad situation. And I think, I'm not saying women's skill sets are better than men. What I'm saying is that to have leadership, which is mainly based on male characteristics and skill sets without the woman's side, or vice versa, is less good than having it as a complementary skill set. So I believe that women leaders should be women and leaders. They shouldn't be trying to pretend to be like men. There's so many women in politics who are trying to be like men. And I say, we have something to add, value to add, and the added value we have is not copying the style of men, it's being women leaders with all our emotional intelligence, skill set that we bring, and the consensus building that we know how to do. This is what the world needs, and this is what women bring, and this is why we need women in 50% of decision-making positions everywhere, in every field, public, private, etc.
Wow, I love that. I love that. So I'm sure that once a woman is in a position, in a political position, what you're saying makes sense. But we have this idea that in order to get to a political position, you have to fight and you have to push over and you have to make room for yourself. And you have to, I'm guessing, I mean, this is, what we think that you have to have some masculine also leadership to be able to get to that position. So is
Yeah.
it true, or can you also get to those positions with feminine leadership?
Well, since when is being pushy a male thing? Obviously, I haven't met my Moroccan mother.
That's true.
I don't think these are male qualities at all. I think, to be smart and manipulative can be very feminine.
That's true.
And that's really what you need. And I'm always a believer that you catch much more with honey than you do with vinegar. And a really smart politician doesn't go on the attack, goes on the charm offensive. And I think that certainly, I didn't have to push anybody out the way to get where I did. I did it by working very hard, by bringing people value, by helping people. Of course, by also having some political skills, but not by running anybody over. And in fact, the people who do get where they get to by running people over find themselves being run over at some point. And so I try not to put out those vibes in the world.
So do you think that the journey to get to high level positions in politics is the same for a man and for a woman? Or do you think
No,
that there's a difference?
I think women have to work much harder.
Okay.
I think women have to work much harder because I think women are underestimated in politics. And being underestimated is a real disadvantage because people don't take you as seriously. I was interviewed the other day, actually, and I remembered a story that I hadn't thought about for ages. A couple of years ago, when I was a city council member, we were fighting a particular issue, and we weren't moving ahead. And we had like a meeting with the mayor, and we were talking about when this issue would come to the forefront, which would be in 3 more years because it was an infrastructural issue. And I remember, yes, because in 3 years, and this deputy mayor said to me, well, 3 years, Fleur, you're not going to be here in 3 years. And the funny thing is that he's not here anymore. Wow. Well, that's what I mean by the underestimation in politics. But even in that, I find that there's an advantage. And the advantage is that they don't see you coming when they underestimate you. And so what you have is the power of surprise. So, you have to always make lemonade out of lemons. And that's what I try and do. You are underestimated as a woman. When you're on a list, they're like, oh, she's the token woman. They didn't realize what you have to do, how impressive you have to be on a list, to be picked, to run for primaries. These are very, very tough things. And so nobody's giving women anything for free. Whatever woman you see in what position she's in, you understand that she's fought to be there and she deserves to be there and she should not be underestimated.
Definitely. And were there any sacrifices that you had to make along the way to get to this?
I'll give you the list.
Okay.
No, listen, the main sacrifice, I think, is being in the public eye and opening yourself up to people just, trying to pick you down. You're here doing good. You're here trying to do your best. Nobody's perfect. People make mistakes. Nobody's going to agree with you all the time. That's okay. But for people to get personal and insult you in such an ugly way and, throw shade on your intentions, maybe something you did is not to everybody's agreement, but why assume that people's intentions are bad? I always assume people's intentions are good. Maybe they just got it wrong in how they're doing it. But those are all the things you get. You sacrifice your kind of peace when you become a public figure. You sacrifice time with your family. You sacrifice your privacy. There's a lot of things you sacrifice, but ultimately, if you're doing it, it's because what you're getting on the other side, which is the satisfaction of doing what you're doing, of moving things forward, of being having the privilege to lead, that is much, much stronger than the sacrifices that you're making. But in life, there's always a price to everything. And so being a politician, of course, has its price. As a mother of four, it has its price on the time, like I said, time with my children, the fact that they are, fadichot, you're on in this newspaper. Oh, please don't join TikTok, mommy, please. I'm embarrassing them constantly.
For sure. And I also wanted to ask you about the UAE because you are the co-founder of the UAE Business Israel Business Council and also the Gulf Israel Women's Forum. And for Women's Day, I was sitting on I-24, talking about the difference between entrepreneurs or women in Israel and in UAE. And I was very surprised actually to hear that there were 11 ministers women in the UAE out of 30. And I was wondering, like, we always think that Israel is this, big developed country and that the Arab countries are, behind us. But in that regard, I was very surprised to hear that women are so advanced in those countries.
Well, absolutely. One of the misconceptions, I think, about the Gulf is the role of women. And people are like telling me, oh, so are women repressed house? They have no idea. First of all, it's incredible, but it's actually a very matriarchal society. It's all about the mother. The mother is the center of everybody's world, not the father, the mother. Absolutely amazing. I love it. And the second thing is that in their count, I mean, they're not a democracy, but they do have a council that their leaders elect. 50% of the representatives are women. And like you said, almost 50% of the ministers are women. And we in Israel, on 25% in the Knesset and 20% in my council, local government in general is 18, 19%. So they're doing much better than us. And that's really one of the misconceptions. There's women, very strong women, they're in business, public, private, you mentioned it. It's really very, very impressive.
And so do you think that this comes from the fact that women here are not necessarily ready for leadership roles, or is it coming from the fact that the military is very important here and it's a necessary step to get to leadership roles? Like, how do you explain that?
I don't know what it is. I think we got lost along the way. What people don't seem to understand that the Zionist, the first ever Zionist Congress was the first ever time that women had the vote. This was late 19th century. Late 19th century. 1897 or something like that, right? The first Zionist Congress, okay? Women had the right to vote. Nowhere else in the world women had the right to vote. So the Zionist cause started off as one of the most egalitarian causes in the world. I always talk about women, when we talk about the early roots of Zionism, people talk about the fathers of Zionism, and we forget to talk about the mothers of Zionism. The mothers of Zionism were the women who set up Witzo, Naamat, Hadassah Hospital, because whilst the men were doing the diplomatic work, the women came to Israel, or the pre-state Israel, and they were like, people are dying, babies are dying, people have nowhere to eat, people have health problems. We've got to set up a healthcare system. We've got to set up Tipat Chalav, where we all go to take our kids to vaccinate. That was set up by the mothers of Zionism. And this is the system we have till today. And so we started off very, very well. Women in the army, etc. Where have we gone wrong? And I don't think we've gone very wrong. We still have equal rights. What we don't have 100% yet, and this is what we have to work on, is equal opportunity. And that is making sure that women and girls understand that they can be whatever they want to be. And for that, we have to have role models, very obvious role models of successful women, of women in leadership positions. So little girls look around and say, hey, I can be that too. I can be prime minister, I can be president. And these are the types of things that I work on every day. Mentoring women, role modeling for women, speaking to girls, bringing, one of my favorite stories is I advanced this program to put pictures of women leaders of arms of government in schools, because all I could see was the prime minister and the president and the chief of staff, all men. And so I thought, my daughters are looking around and the message they're getting is, this is not for you, honey. This is for the men. And so, at the time, the governor of the Bank of Israel was a woman. And till today, the president of the High Court is a woman. So I printed pictures of them and I did this big campaign, and 220 schools put up pictures of women in their walls to make sure that little girls understood that they too can be whatever they want to be, and they should try. So we're still far. We still have to push forward. We still have to do lots of positive discrimination, affirmative action. In an ideal world, we don't need affirmative action, but we're not in an ideal world yet. And so until we get there, we need lots and lots of that and lots of role modeling.
Definitely. Wow, that's an amazing story. So last question I want to ask, because you do have experience in the public sector, in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector. And I want to ask you, where do you think is the most powerful impact that you can have is it from being a politician? Is it from being in business? Is it from being in nonprofit? Where do you think is the most powerful impact you can have on other people?
I don't think we can measure, okay? Because look, who has a bigger impact, Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, or the president of Canada? You can't. These are things you can't measure. What I think the only thing that should guide us forward is, am I improving people's lives on a macro level and on a micro level? Sometimes people think that it's all about the macro, and they forget about the one person who needs your help, not one individual. And the Torah teaches us that it's really about both. You can do big changes, but if you don't even have 5 minutes for your elderly neighbor or to do a mitzvah for a friend, then really, what are you doing? And so I'm always trying to balance this out. I'm always, me, I'm always very busy advancing different things. And a friend of mine a couple of years ago got cancer. And I remember thinking to myself, if I don't have the time to sit with him during his chemo, I don't care what the hell I'm doing for the good of the city, who am I? And so these are the balances we have to balance, the being a good person, a mensch on a day-to-day, just helping the person who needs your help, that you can help. Everybody needs some type of help, but the question is, how can you help that person? And on a macro level, how can you help a society? How can you help women? How can you help different sectors of society, the different population, marginalized population groups? And I think it's a balance. And I think that's the only measure. Am I doing something, to help my neighbor? And am I doing something to help my community, my school, my street, whatever it is, something a little bit more macro.
Thank you so much, Fleur. And I can say that for us, for our community, you've been so generous. You've come twice and you've played that role of the role model to teach us and inspire us. And I really, really thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. And I hope that we'll see more of you even.
Invite me and I'll come. You know me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.